You might feel a pang of hurt or confusion when an avoidant partner steps back, creating a gap filled with silence. It's tempting to think that if they are withdrawing, you should either flood the space with desperate messages or, conversely, vanish completely in protest. But the real insight lies in understanding that respecting their need for space doesn't mean you should disappear emotionally. It means instead holding on to a quiet, steady presence that reassures them you're still there, even while you honor their call for distance. There's a subtle art in balancing space and connection, a dance that involves recognizing that their pulling away isn't necessarily a rejection of you, but rather a natural self-protective move. When an avoidant retreats, it is often because deep down they fear being overwhelmed, not because they've stopped caring about the connection you share. They're fighting an internal battle between the desire for closeness and the need to maintain their independence. And in that tension, what they secretly crave is the clarity that comes from knowing you still care. Imagine your presence as a gentle light in a dark room. This light isn't brilliant or intrusive. Instead, it bathes the space in a calm glow that's both reassuring and warm. In relationships, especially those touched by avoidant tendencies, that light represents your emotional availability. It's important to send subtle signals that you are there, caring consistently without crowding or imposing. This approach taps into a deeper understanding of human behavior. It acknowledges that true connection isn't about constant interaction, but about the unspoken trust that each person's inner space is respected. At its core, this balance between respecting space and remaining emotionally engaged is both psychological and philosophical. Psychologically, it reflects an understanding of attachment, dynamics the push and pull between autonomy and intimacy. Philosophically, it speaks to the idea that love and care are not measured by frequency or intensity of contact, but by the quality of the connection that endures even in quiet moments. By choosing not to chase relentlessly, you are honoring both your own integrity and the other person's need for autonomy. Yet, by also avoiding a complete withdrawal, you prevent the chill of abandonment from setting in. It's crucial to understand that this isn't about playing mind games or manipulation. It's about deliberately choosing a course of action that prioritizes inner strength over reactive behavior. When you're tempted to flood them with messages out of fear of losing the connection, you're not demonstrating strength. Instead, you risk reinforcing their discomfort with intimacy. On the other hand, if you vanish silently, it can validate their fear that closeness inevitably leads to suffocation or engulfment. The goal is to create a safe space, a balance where they know you're available, yet not intrusively so. This perspective requires you to cultivate self-awareness and inner calm. In the midst of silence, when anxiety might make you question your worth or the value of the relationship, remember that emotional resilience is powerful. It isn't about playing hard to get, but about recognizing that your well-being isn't dependent on constant validation. Rather, it emerges from an understanding that quality connection thrives in an atmosphere of mutual respect and self-sufficiency. Your calm, steady presence becomes the quiet reminder that love is not a reaction, but a deliberate choice made over time. On a deeper level, this approach challenges the modern compulsion for immediate gratification and relentless communication. In our digital age, where responsiveness is often equated with caring, stepping back to allow space can feel counterintuitive. But think of it like nurturing a garden. You can't expect plants to flourish with constant watering. There's a rhythm to growth, a time for quiet, reflective energy to take root, and a time for active engagement to bloom. By maintaining your own sense of self and staying emotionally available, you give both yourself and the other person the room needed for natural, healthy growth. What you're really doing is establishing a relationship dynamic that is less about the frantic pace of reaction and more about the enduring power of consistency. Your steady, heartfelt presence stands as a testament not only to your capacity for love, but also to your respect for the other's process. When you remain connected without intruding, you signal to them that true closeness can exist without suffocation, that healthy intimacy is built on a foundation of mutual support and freedom. Let this be a reminder, even during the quiet of no contact, your best asset is your calm, resilient, and compassionate self. By respecting their space and letting your consistent presence shine through, you're not only preserving the relationship, you're building a bridge that can lead to deeper understanding and eventual reconnection. Remember, when the silence feels overwhelming, stay true to your inner light. It is in that unwavering glow, the soft but persistent reminder of who you are, that you will find the strength to honor both your needs and theirs. When someone with avoidant tendencies pulls away, your instinct might be to wait, to hit pause on your life and hold your breath, hoping they come back around. But what if I told you that waiting in stillness is the exact opposite of what actually speaks to them? Because here's the truth, avoidants don't want to see you frozen. They want to see you moving, evolving, thriving. Even from a distance they're watching, and they are deeply impacted by how you show up in your own life during that silence. Now, they might never admit it. Avoidants aren't going to text you out of the blue to say, "Hey," just checking in to see if you're becoming a better version of yourself. That's not how they're wired, but deep down they're drawn to strength. Not the kind that shouts or performs, but the kind that's quietly resilient, rooted, and growing even when no one's watching. The kind that doesn't beg or chase, but also doesn't disappear. It just holds its ground and becomes more itself. There's a kind of psychological magnetism to someone who uses solitude to build, rather than break. It signals emotional self-reliance, something an avoidant craves in a partner, even if they don't have the words for it. See, for someone with avoidant attachment, closeness feels risky. Intimacy can trigger fear. So when you grow during no contact, what you're really doing is reducing the threat level in their mind. You're showing them that connection with you doesn't mean losing themselves. That you're not a burden to manage, but an equal who can stand on your own, who adds to their life rather than consumes it. That's incredibly powerful, and it's not just about how it looks on the surface. It's about how it feels energetically. When you start pouring into your goals, your passions, your mental and physical well-being, you shift the entire emotional dynamic. Suddenly, the anxious energy that may have been present before, the need for reassurance, the fear of abandonment, gets replaced with grounded confidence. And that shift doesn't go unnoticed, even if there's no contact, even if they've unfollowed you. People feel energy. People sense when something has changed, when someone they knew is becoming someone they admire. Let me be clear, this isn't about trying to win them back through transformation. It's about recognizing that no contact isn't a holding pattern, it's a growth period. It's the time you stop waiting and start becoming. And ironically, that's the very thing avoidants secretly want from you. They want to feel safe getting close. And nothing makes closeness safer than being with someone who doesn't need constant reassurance to feel whole. This is where the psychological meets the philosophical, because it's not just about improving your habits, or building a better body, or getting a promotion, though those are great. It's about embodying the idea that you are not defined by someone else's distance. You are not diminished by their absence. Your value doesn't shrink just because someone steps away. In fact, their absence creates the space for you to return to yourself, to rediscover who you are without trying to manage someone else's comfort. And here's what's wild: growth during no contact doesn't just affect them. It rewires you. The more you pour into yourself, the less you cling to outcomes. The less you chase, the more you attract, because you're not operating from lack anymore. You're not trying to prove your worth, you're living it. And that changes the entire tone of the relationship if and when it resumes. You're no longer coming from a place of "please choose me." You're standing in a place of "I already chose me." That energy that is irresistible, not because it's manipulative, not because it's part of some clever strategy, but because it's rare. Most people freeze in fear during separation. You instead are choosing to move through it, to transform it into something meaningful. That's what avoidants secretly want to see. Someone who respects their need for space, but doesn't abandon their own growth in the process. So if you're in no contact right now, ask yourself, are you waiting or are you becoming? Are you hoping they come back to the same version of you they left? Or are you creating someone even you are proud of? Let this sink in. Your silence isn't empty if it's filled with purpose. When someone you care about suddenly pulls away when the texts stop, the calls vanish, and you're left staring into silence. Your nervous system doesn't whisper, it screams. And in that moment, it's so easy to fall into a panic spiral. You start overanalyzing, overthinking, maybe even oversharing. You want answers, closure, connection. But here's what you need to understand about avoidant individuals. They are wired to fear intensity, not just emotional closeness, but emotional volatility. What they secretly want during no contact is for you to stay calm, to not react, to show them, without saying a word, that connection with you doesn't mean chaos. That doesn't mean you ignore your feelings. This isn't about suppressing your pain or pretending you're unaffected. But there's a difference between feeling something and being consumed by it. The moment you start reacting, sending angry messages, posting vague emotional quotes, or trying to provoke a response, you're confirming exactly what their nervous system fears. That intimacy equals instability. That closeness leads to emotional pressure. Here's the paradox. Avoidants often crave connection, just like anyone else, but they have an internal blueprint that equates closeness with risk. They fear engulfment. They've likely been conditioned, often from early relationships, to believe that needing someone too much leads to pain or loss of control. So when a relationship starts to deepen or tension arises, their instinct is to pull back to regain a sense of emotional safety. And the moment you react with volatility, it justifies their retreat. It confirms their deepest belief, see, I was right to pull away. This is where your power lies. Because how you respond, or don't respond, can actually rewrite that belief. When you stay grounded, when you show emotional regulation instead of emotional chaos, it sends a subtle, powerful message. I can handle distance. I can handle uncertainty, and I can handle you. That's what avoidants are watching for, not declarations of love, not grand gestures, but your ability to be stable under pressure. Psychologically, this taps into the nervous system's need for safety. When someone feels overwhelmed, what they're looking for isn't closeness. They're looking for signs that you are safe to come close to. And nothing says safe louder than someone who can manage their emotions without projecting them outward. This isn't about being cold, it's about being solid. Calmness is your credibility. Consistency is your power. Philosophically, this speaks to the discipline of non-reactivity, the ability to observe your emotions without becoming them. That's a rare kind of strength, and a deeply attractive one, because in a world where most people are reactive, someone who can sit in discomfort without exploding becomes magnetic. You're not chasing, you're not punishing, you're not pretending. You're simply holding your ground with grace. Now, let's be honest. This is not easy. Your ego wants to do something, anything, just to get a response. You want to prove your worth, remind them of your value, break the silence. But when you act from that space, you're not leading from confidence. You're leading from fear. And fear energy never creates connection. It repels. What creates connection is when you stay in your lane, honor your feelings privately, and resist the urge to control the outcome. Let me give you a perspective shift. Emotional neutrality isn't apathy, it's maturity. It's the ability to say, I can care deeply and still not lose myself. I can be disappointed, hurt, even heartbroken, and still stay rooted in who I am. That kind of presence doesn't beg for connection, it invites it. And over time, it builds something stronger than affection. It builds trust. Because think about it. If you want someone to come closer, they need to believe it's safe, that you won't explode, that you won't collapse, that you're not a fire they have to extinguish every time emotions rise. You become someone who can handle distance without spiraling, someone who can hold emotional complexity without falling apart. That steadiness, that is exactly what someone with avoidant tendencies is subconsciously craving, but terrified they won't find. So during no contact, your job isn't to prove your love. It's to prove your stability, to show, not with words, but with your energy, that you are emotionally self-sufficient, that your inner world is calm, not because you don't care, but because you do, and because you've learned how to carry your emotions with maturity, not desperation. This doesn't just change how they see you. It changes how you see yourself. Because when you realize you don't have to chase to be chosen, you reclaim something incredibly important, your sense of power. And from that space, whether they come back or not becomes less important than the fact that you stayed grounded. You stayed in alignment. You kept your dignity. So the next time silence shows up, don't try to fill it. Let it teach you something. Let it show you how much strength you really have. And let that strength become the foundation not just for reconnection, but for a relationship that no longer needs reactivity to feel real. When you're in no contact with someone who has avoidant tendencies, there's a subtle but critical tension you have to hold, and it's this: they don't want pressure, but they also don't want the door slammed shut. It's a paradox that trips people up constantly. One minute, you're thinking, okay, I'll just disappear completely so they can miss me. And the next minute, you're tempted to reach out, to say something, anything, just to reopen the line of communication. But here's the truth. What avoidants secretly want is not grand gestures or total silence. What they want is to feel that the door is still open without being pushed to walk through it. Avoidants need to believe that returning is their choice, not your agenda. And that requires an incredible amount of self-control on your part. Because the emotional need to reconnect can be so strong, you'll start looking for excuses to break the silence. You'll tell yourself it's just a casual check-in, or a friendly reminder that you still care. But if that message carries even a trace of desperation, pressure, or hidden expectation, they will feel it. And it will push them further away. Psychologically, this comes down to how avoidants process vulnerability. For them, vulnerability can feel like entrapment. If they sense even the slightest hint of emotional obligation, they pull away not to hurt you, but to protect themselves. So your job is to create an environment that feels open, but not demanding, available, but not clinging. You want them to know they can return without being met by an emotional interrogation or a flood of unmet expectations. Now, that doesn't mean you sit around and wait. And it definitely doesn't mean you keep breadcrumbs going, liking their posts, sending ambiguous signals, or trying to manipulate the silence into something meaningful. That kind of behavior isn't openness, it's performance. And avoidance can sense when there's an emotional hook behind your actions. It's not subtle. They've spent their whole lives learning how to detect it. So what does leaving the door open really look like? It means living your life fully authentically, unapologetically, while still holding space in your heart for the possibility of reconnection. It means aligning your actions with your values. If you value respect and emotional safety, you don't chase. If you value truth, you don't play games. If you value connection, you don't pretend you've stopped caring. You simply care without needing them to reciprocate right now. Philosophically, this is about radical acceptance. accepting that they are on their own path at their own pace. And that love, real love, isn't about ownership or timing or forcing outcomes. It's about creating a space where someone wants to return, not because they're guilted into it, but because it feels safe. It feels real, and that kind of emotional environment can only be created by someone who understands their own worth deeply enough to say, "I'm here if you're ready, but I'm not waiting to live." There's a quiet strength in that, in showing that your heart is open, but your life is moving forward. In communicating, through your energy, your growth, your consistency, that you're not punishing them for needing space. You're just honoring it, and at the same time, you're not shutting yourself down emotionally. You're not becoming bitter or closed off. You're staying open, but grounded, receptive, but not needy. This is where emotional maturity comes in. Because it's easy to think of no contact as a game, a tactic, a countdown until someone finally reaches back. But when you start to understand the emotional landscape of avoidant attachment, you realize that your job isn't to win them back. It's to create conditions where if they return, it's to a relationship dynamic that's healthier, more secure, and more respectful than it was before. And sometimes, yes, leaving the door open also means letting go of the idea that they have to walk through it. That's the part no one wants to hear, but it's real. Leaving the door open is as much an act of faith as it is an act of courage. You're saying, if you choose to return, I'll meet you with openness, not anger. But you're also saying, if you don't, I'll keep walking forward anyway. And that's not weakness. That's power. So if you're in no contact right now, ask yourself, is your door open out of love or out of fear? Are you holding space because it aligns with who you are, or because you're afraid of being forgotten? Because when the door is left open from a place of strength, not longing, it becomes an invitation, not a trap. And that's the kind of invitation avoidants are actually capable of walking toward.